Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show, highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyles, community, and neighborhood. And now, from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Hey, Dorothy, tax season is just in our rearview mirror. Did you get your taxes paid on time?
Of course I did.
Everybody was rushing to the post office and for the April rush.
I'm sure.
Every year. Tax season is a great time for lots of people to take stock of where they are and where they're going. And in Moore County, we have so many different generations living here, all the way from the civics, all the way down through the millennials. And one of the things that becomes a very big topic both in our real estate world and just in our everyday living is the topic of estate planning, making sure that your assets are where you want them to be. There's a whole topic about estate planning and about probate, which we're going to have a pretty good conversation about today. And I'm being joined by 3 guests. I want to introduce first Ashley Haddock, who is a real estate broker with 4 properties. And equally important, Ashley, you work with Outreach Magazine through Aging Outreach in Southern Pines in advertising.
Yes, that's right. And
caregivers are working with many of their clients in the client's home.
Correct.
So the whole concept of estate planning is probably something that you're very familiar with, or at least you've got your foot in that circle in some shape or form.
That's right.
Yeah. And in real estate also we have those considerations when we're working with people of all different ages and people moving into the state or moving out of the state. Bob Thompson, who is our featured guest today, is a real estate and estate attorney in Southern Pines and is an attorney that I've had the privilege of working with for, Bob, I can't even count how many years, but I wanted to say good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am in great shape.
And you are here also with your partner, Tyler Crisco, who is a young attorney. We're glad to have a native of Moore County.
Yes, that's true.
And you and Bob have been together for how long now?
I started last November. I passed the bar last July.
Well, you're a Moore County native. You graduated NC State, law school at William & Mary.
Yes.
Highest honors wherever you went, just like I did not in my day. And you're focusing on real estate and estate planning as well.
Yes, that's true. We do most of the same practice areas.
Okay. Bob, you've been here for 30 years practicing?
34 years now.
Jeez.
Seems like only yesterday.
You were recognized as being a specialist for 25 years by the North Carolina Bar in areas of real estate, residential, and commercial. And you also you have a board specialization in estate planning and probate law from the NC Bar.
Yes.
You've seen it all. Pretty much.
Every day, something new.
How many generations of families have you worked with in the 34 years you've been practicing?
I think we might have touched on 4. Some of those, the first generation is gone now, so they keep moving up in the hierarchy. But we have had legal work for, I think, 4 generations.
In the real estate business, we always come upon a lot of misunderstandings about tax planning, estate planning. When people are moving here from other states, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people have so much access to so much information on the internet. They can Google any topic and get an opinion. It might not be based in the state of North Carolina, but you're here to clear up and clarify and explain a lot of the nuances of estate planning today, aren't you?
Well, I'm going to try and clarify, give everybody the truth that as I know it, and tell you about some problem areas we have.
Yeah. Can you just explain what a trust is and what probate is, just to start the conversation?
Well, a trust is an arrangement between a trustee and a grantor and a beneficiary, where the trustee holds property for the benefit of another.
Okay.
And in probate is basically the state's method of policing property that passes by will and some other ways. And it is a protective procedure to try and keep everyone's property safe, passing under the law and passing according to terms of the will. And each of the estates that is in probate gets audited by the Clerk of Superior Court.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, you had a question?
Yes. I've encountered a number of real estate clients who insist that their properties must be legally put into a trust. They tell me that they had it this way in their former state of residence. What is your advice?
Well, trusts are not one size fits all, and some people they're good for, some people they're not. They're an overkill. Real property in North Carolina does not become a probate asset. It passes using the will as a deed. So there's no reason, if you're just trying to avoid probate, to necessarily put real property in a trust. If the real property is held by a resident of another state, then we might say yes, you should have a trust to avoid an ancillary administration if somebody dies. But there is a very protected tenancy called tenancy by the entirety, right, which where a husband and wife hold the property in a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, and that is protected from creditors of either spouse. It does not allow creditors of the estate of a deceased individual to attack that property. So I like that generally. If you can't tell me another reason that you need to have it in a trust.
So the will protects the property. The will that you devise protects the property if you've dictated where you want the property to go without having to put it in a trust?
Yes. Well, the property is not actually probate property, okay, but the will acts as a deed. So whoever the beneficiaries under the will are the ones that get the real estate. That part of it is not under court supervision unless you specifically bring the real property into the estate by making a bequest in the will to the executor, for instance, for the purpose of sale.
And this is indigenous to North Carolina. Is each state different?
Yes, each state is different. Many states you have to have a trust because the probate system's very comprehensive and delays use of the property or sale of the property for quite a while. Most of the bigger states that you're familiar with, California, New York, and some of those states are especially bad with their probate proceeding. And we are not bad, I don't think, with our probate proceeding. It's relatively simple. It does hold things up for just a little while, but that's kind of a safety measure so that everything can be done properly.
Tyler, I have to ask you, you're out of law school how many years?
I graduated last May, so
okay,
May of 2016.
So you speak for a lot of people in your generation. Is estate planning something high on your agenda at this stage in your life? And what about people who come in as real estate clients who are purchasing property from out of state? Do they even think about estate planning at this stage?
Well, I know several of my friends say that they don't have enough money or enough assets to make a will. So then I have to remind them that everyone needs a will. It's not up to a certain point, so it's always good to have that in the back of your mind.
Even in your late 20s or early 30s?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you find that most people are doing that? Are they mindful of setting up a will at that age, or are they waiting till a later time in their lives?
from what I found, they mostly wait to the later point in the life, so I'm trying to convince them otherwise.
Okay, so let's talk to Ashley and find out if she has a will. Ashley is recently married. She represents that demographic in her late 20s. Ashley, you're on.
Yes, so I do not have a will, and neither does my husband.
Tyler,
and
you got to work on her.
Exactly, and I think it's for the same reasons that you just said, Tyler, is that we feel that maybe we know something happens, we know what each other wants, and we just haven't gone that far into thinking of putting it down. But I definitely believe it's something important to do.
Yeah, it's and you have a lot of people, Bob, in your practice who are buying property in North Carolina who are moving here from other states.
Correct.
And they assume that they know what they need to do until they sit down and talk with you.
Well, some of them do. Most of the time, they eventually find their way in. It's probably not the highest thing on their priority list. Probably buying a house from you, Bill, is first. But then eventually they do. And I might comment to Ashley that a lot of times we start getting those younger clients about the time they have children, and they figure out that if something happens to them, they're going to need a guardian. And they are afraid about who is going to be the guardian of their children, because a lot of times the person that steps up with the most vociferous desire to have the children is the person that you would possibly least want to have your children. So it's very important that the guardianship be the one that you choose. You do that in the will. And that brings a lot of folks in, and then the only thing that happens when they come in, they say, well, I need to have this will. And I say, well, who do you want to be the guardian? And they say, oh, I hadn't thought of that yet. So but it is a very important thing, and it's a big decision, and it kind of takes people back. They have to think about it. But that is a way that we get those younger clients.
I've seen a lot of younger clients in North Carolina, especially with the military. So they buy homes in North Carolina, and 3 to 4 years later, they're transferred to another state. And many of them keep their property in North Carolina as a rental property. Many of them who come into the state to purchase property already own a property either in Colorado or Texas or whatever base they were at in the past. Wouldn't they be candidates for a will and some estate planning at a very young age?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is kind of tricky, because sometimes I only practice in North Carolina, and other states have declined to ask me to help them. So it's one of those things that we try and do our documents so they'd be good in any state, but there are some risks if they're domiciled in another state. If they're domiciled here, then their will should be here.
Ashley can't relate to what I'm going to ask you, and nor can Tyler. But let's talk about the baby boomer generation for a minute. We are a large percentage of the population, and it seems like at every stage we're at, it becomes the center stage. And today, with the baby boomers moving on up beyond 55 and beyond, estate planning all of a sudden becomes like the in thing. They need to start to catch up and do what they maybe hadn't done in the past. Do you find that the baby boomers are one of the reasons there's so much misinformation, and why there are so many mailers that we get in our mailbox advertising a free steak dinner, or there seem to be financial planners who are targeting the baby boomer generation, and I've never been to one of these dinners, but every other month I get an invitation to come and eat with somebody I don't even know
For free.
Yeah, for free, right?
We call them the free lunch seminars.
What are they?
They are basically a sales method. You get people in the door, and then you, through one way or another, a lot of times it's through fear of probate, scaring people, telling them the state's going to take their property. Many things that happen at those, they're going to be subject to a state tax, and they need to avoid that. It's kind of generic scare routine to get people to buy a product. And as you know, I don't sell a product. I just sell my advice. And we are totally on the side of the client. That is our only interest. So we're very different in how we approach estate planning. Now you actually asked two questions.
Right. Now he's
Without
sounding like
knowing
an
it.
attorney. Now he's sounding
Yeah.
like an attorney. You actually asked two questions, Bill. I didn't know that I did.
You
but
asked two questions. The first one was when you said the baby boomers.
Right.
A lot of the baby boomers come in to us because they did their wills when their children were young and they wanted to appoint the guardian. Their children are now older. They
Right.
haven't changed those wills sometimes for 25 or 30 years.
Mhm.
And it suddenly dawned on them that their children no longer need guardians. They have the wrong people. A lot of times their children would be their choice for executor. And so those are people that we get in when they move here. The free lunch seminars, I think, are particularly aimed at older, even maybe post-baby boomers that have more money and maybe are more susceptible to the fear that something will happen to them in their very old age, or
Right.
that they need some way to avoid certain things.
To make Bob's point, Ashley, I'm going to bet that you have never received an invitation to a free lunch for a seminar of this type.
I have not.
You will in about 20, 25 years. That's what I'm guessing.
I won't hold my breath.
You're not on that mailing list yet, nor is Tyler. Let's come back in the second set. We're going to talk all about estate planning today. There's so much misinformation and there's so much information out there that I don't know how people make informed decisions. Our guest today is Robert Thompson, attorney at law here in Southern Pines, and Tyler Crisco. We'll be right back.
Nothing ever slows her down and a mess is not allowed. Our house in the middle of our street. Our house. Our house in the middle of our street. Our house in the middle of our street.
Welcome back to All Things Moore County. We're talking about estate planning and probate today, and Ashley, in our real estate business, so much of what Bob and Tyler are talking about is tangential to what we do, trying to help people, buy or sell homes.
That's right, Bill. So I wanted to ask on this topic. I know we're here to kind of provide clarity for our listeners.
Yeah.
And just some different points. So I wanted to ask you, Tyler, what is the process for this? So I think that a lot of people have this impression that it takes hours and hours of their time. And I'm sure it depends on a case-by-case basis. But how many visits and how long do you think it would take for someone to come in and get this task completed with you?
Well, it doesn't take as long as they might suspect. They usually call to set up an appointment, come in, and we'll talk to them for maybe an hour, hour and a half with the conference. We'll ask them questions about what they have, their assets, who do they want the assets to go to, and those type of questions. And that usually takes an hour, hour and a half, depending on how much they have. And then we draft the documents, and we try to send those out, the draft documents, to the client within the next day or so. So they have something in hand to look at quickly, so they can see if those documents match what they want or expect. And then once they approve the documents, we have them back in to sign.
Okay, great. So it can be a fairly short process if someone knows what they want for the most part, and you're there to assist them and help put it into legal terms for them so that it's going to be upheld, that they're not going to have to worry about it.
Yes, we try to put their wishes and desires into a paper form, a hard copy, yes.
Oh, great.
I've had some of those conversations myself with Bob, and when Bob asks me a question, part of what he does is what we do as real estate brokers. He tries to understand the motivation behind our desires. I think you try to size up your clients, where they're coming from, and maybe sometimes you have a way of proposing something that they might not have thought of based on the information that they've given you, almost like a counselor.
Yes, many times. And, in estate planning, I consider there really three prongs. One is the documentation that we're concerned about, and that's where we would try and take into account any special family situations, anything that they wanted specially done. The will in that case, or the trust, or the other documents, they're really instructions to someone about how they want things handled for them. And in most cases, if they're unable to handle them for themselves, we try and recognize tax issues, and we recognize both estate tax, which was the traditional planning issue, and now income tax, because income tax is very important. We're having more people, especially young people, with IRAs, 401ks, and other types of plans that have beneficiaries, and we spend an awful lot of our time on that. So we're concerned about how things are titled, how the real property is titled, and how it all ties together. But we do try and get the family situation from the client, figure out what we need to do to protect everyone in the mix, and put their wishes in place.
And this is not 1958, where today you have so many blended families, marriages where people are not married maybe 40 years and they come in and it's such a purist approach. You have stepchildren. The blended family issue's got to throw a little monkey wrench into everything.
Basically makes it very interesting. And it depends on how long they've been married as to how important those issues are.
But that does complicate the whole process. It's not so cut and dry and vanilla.
No, and certainly it depends on whether the children from the second marriage grew up with the parents that we're dealing with both parents. Normally they grew up with one of them. But it depends on how those children are associated. Many times if they married later, you can have two sets of children that barely know each other. So it's very important to know that situation. We also need to know who are the good doobies and who are the bad doobies, because we try to avoid putting the bad doobies in any position of authority or trust. And you'd be surprised how this works out. I have people that come in and say, well, I want my son, daughter to be executor because they're the oldest. And I say, okay. And then we go down the list, and they have some other folks in there. And then I say, well, now I want to make sure, tell me about these folks. And I want to know that your eldest son has integrity, that you can trust him, that he would do exactly what you want him to do. He understands enough about you to pick up that ball and do it for you. Could be dealing with all of your finances, could be dealing with your health care options and consenting to medical care. And then every now and again, the parents say, oh yeah, he's extremely trustworthy except for his drug problem. And he's just gotten out of rehab, and then he did that when he got out of jail for theft. And we say, being first doesn't necessarily matter. This is not going to work. And we remove that child from positions of authority. But it's sort of interesting that people don't think about some of these issues. And so they think more in terms of family hierarchy. So we have to really sort of pull information out of them, and we normally spend a good deal of time questioning them about things.
The timing of this show, what was there something specifically that prompted the timing of the show for now? Is estate planning becoming a real hot ticket item? There's just a lot of things going on between the advertising, the commercials on TV, the reverse mortgages. There's so much stuff. And is anyone out there, are you just wanting to get out there and strike a very clear understanding, so not as to confuse people? in the marketplace?
Well, I think I'd like to bring up some of these issues
Yeah.
that people have misconceptions about,
Okay.
and avoid having them fall into any traps that can be extremely expensive for them or for their children in the future.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of safety and avoiding things that might hurt them. And we have to look, in order to find those things out, we have to look at the big picture. We have to have everything laid out. We have to know where their assets are, how they're titled, what they want done. We normally start with their existing documents and then go forward from there.
Okay.
So we're interested in making sure that they don't really abuse themselves financially, mostly.
Right.
Although there are some other health aspects and scams out there too. I could talk about those later, but
Okay.
we're really interested in. Let me give you some examples of this. People who have IRAs or 401ks need beneficiary designations on them. And the default on those, if they don't have beneficiaries named, and these are kind of a term of art, designated beneficiaries, who under the tax code can take those assets without incurring tax and roll them over into something else, then if it gets paid perchance to their estate, then they're going to have serious tax problem. Either they will or their children, their beneficiaries will. We had one recently where and this is a CPA and financial planner from another state, so I'm safe here, not insulting anybody locally.
We do that in the third set.
Oh.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But I try not to insult the local people too much.
Right.
But this gentleman, who I think should have known better, put the estate as the beneficiary of what I would consider a very large IRA, which made it terminate at the lady's death, be payable to the estate, and incurred a sizable income tax. So a great deal of the property that this person had accumulated is going to go into income tax, go to the government through the estate, and the beneficiaries are not going to get what she wanted them to have. So it's that kind of thing. We're always looking, we want to look at all of the aspects of the property that people have and see, look at title and beneficiaries, how it's held, and if things are not lined up right, then we want to fix them.
Do you ever run into a conflict of information where somebody has a financial advisor and then they're coming in to do with you their estate planning? Because you're getting two streams of advice sometimes?
Absolutely, but that comes out that the client may not understand what the financial advisor, bank, whoever has done for them.
Right.
Everyone tries to be helpful in this area and save everyone time and money. The problem with that is I am writing what I intend to be a comprehensive estate plan, including documentation on wills, trusts, beneficiary designations, and any other type of transfer mechanism. We sometimes have someone that comes in that has made a POD designation, a TOD designation, as payable on death or transfer on death, or put things in right of survivorship with their children, put beneficiaries on other accounts, not put beneficiaries on their IRAs, and it really screws up where the property is going to go. Let me chance to give you an example of that. We had a client not too long ago that had 3 children. She put a CD in the name of each child, so she had 3 CDs, and they were payable on death, so that they did not go through her estate, which divided everything equally between the 3 children. And then she promptly used one of the CDs to buy her new car. The result of that is 2 of her children got CDs, the other one did not because it wasn't there anymore. And there's not a good way to remedy that situation. So we watch for those kinds of situations. I also have had an interesting one a number of years ago where a gentleman had and I'll muddy the facts so that these aren't disclosure of any private info, a safe deposit box full of stacks of savings bonds. And he also had a very legitimate, well-drafted will that we had done for him that passed the property in certain proportions to various nieces and nephews. He had no children. The stacks in the safe deposit box had designations in a savings bond. His wife had previously died. He had the alternate beneficiary as one of these beneficiaries. But these stacks were all different in size, all had different denominations, different amounts of money, and I was never sure whether he had gotten what he desired using this method, because he did the same thing. I know in one instance he went down and took a stack of these bonds out to buy a car. And then I don't know what happened to that beneficiary, but I don't think those bonds ever got replaced. So I just wasn't, it wasn't a cohesive strategy for estate planning and delivering that property to the people who wanted to have it. So, and of course, we only knew this after he died, because we went down to the inventory of safe deposit box and found these stocks of bonds, and there was nothing much in the estate. There was his house, but almost everything was in these stacks, and it just made it kind of interesting. I just didn't think that was a good way of planning for an estate.
Right. Sounds to me like so much of you do is like putting a financial and legal MRI machine on a conversation and really trying to understand every angle that you can possibly understand so that the advice you can give is sound and puts the people on the right track.
Well, yes, and clients don't often understand what they have done.
Yeah, right.
Because they have done some of these complicated schemes, and they don't realize that they're actually going to affect the disposition of the property. And I'll have somebody come in and they'll tell me about how they've done these things, and then they say, well, now everything's going to pass under my will the way I just told you, right? Wrong. It's not going to do that. It's going to go according to what I call these little wills that people are doing in various places. Everybody's trying to be helpful, but it's not coordinated, and sometimes it causes people to stumble.
Right. Let's get organized for the third set, because now I'm all over the place and I have to have my estate looked at. I'm all of a sudden, all these questions you're bringing up for people who are listening, it's probably a good idea to have your estate and will looked at every couple of years, just like you go to the dentist as your life changes.
Yes, Bill. I try and get people to come in about every 3 to 5 years, so we can look. And it's not so much that they would want to change the documents. Sometimes they do, but that they would have changed the property.
Events change in people's lives as they go.
Correct.
Okay. We're going to come back in the third set. We're talking about estate planning and probate. Bob Thompson is our guest. We'll be right back.
Our house in the middle of our street. Our house. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
Welcome back to our final set. We've been talking with Robert Thompson about estate planning, and Ashley and myself and Chris, Tyler, you also. We all took a break that segment, but you were listening to a couple of things Bob was saying.
Yes, I just wanted to go back and underline something Bob said earlier It's based on what I've seen since I've been working with him, and that is clients who come from out of state to this state who had a will done in their prior state of residence.
Right.
And since every state's different, that will may or may not work in North Carolina. So it's important to go to an estate planning attorney to see if it works, what changes to be made, and all that. And one of the most important parts in the will that might not work in North Carolina is the guardian that Bob was talking about earlier. So if they lived in Wisconsin or California or some other state and chose a guardian and the will that they did then, that might not work in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. So that might be another reason to see a estate planning attorney to have that will looked at.
Yeah. Ashley, many times when I'm with a client who's purchasing a home and they're moving from out of state, if I'm introducing them to Bob or to Tyler, I also tell them that he's an estate attorney and you might want to have your will looked at. And they look at me and there's a deer in the headlights look, like, well, I did my will 5 years ago, and they're coming from New Jersey, let's say. But to what Tyler's saying, it's important when you're moving from state to state. You need to double check and always retool. Brings up a question. Ashley's been married a couple of years now. If you all had a relationship, she was telling you, well, we're planning a family, she's at the ripe old age of 29. How often would you want to get with her, and how soon would you want her to start thinking in terms of planning her estate?
Well, I would like to meet with her immediately to go over her estate plan. And there are some documents in an estate plan that might be more crucial to her now than as opposed to documents that might not apply until many years from now. Like for now, we might look at a will and those types of documents. Later on, there might be other documents once she has kids and those issues come up.
What kind of documents?
Well, the usual package of an estate plan includes documents such as the will, live-in will, healthcare power of attorney, and depending on the facts of the case, there may need to be a trust set up. It may not be, but that's something that depends, that varies from client to client.
Do you advise people to have a living will even at a younger age?
Well, for that, I have to turn it over to Bob because he's dealt with living wills a lot more often.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I like for everybody to have a living will as soon as they're 18 and can sign it.
Okay.
I mean, it's important that they express their desire that the living will is a declaration of desire for natural death, and it basically says that you don't want your life prolonged, but life prolonging measures.
Right.
So it is an important document right now with HIPAA and other parts of the medical community. Everything's going to paperwork, and if you don't have the proper permissions and the proper people appointed, then you're out of luck. It's much more difficult. And we do have that problem also with healthcare powers of attorney. We get calls from the hospital to fax over copies of our clients' living wills or healthcare powers. And the medical community, it's smart on their part because they don't know who their patient wanted to be in charge of their health care,
right,
unless they have some documentation of it. So this is a very important thing to the medical community. They want to see who that person is. I hate to say invariably, but invariably the person that pops up first is not on the list. And it's, there can be all sorts of family feuds and disturbances and dysfunctions. And so the medical community doesn't want to fall in the trap. I don't want to fall in the trap either of talking to the wrong person. So we like to know who, in the power of attorney situation, we hold the client's powers of attorney, and we want to know who it is that we should be talking to about filing that power of attorney. Which one?
Ashley, as you're listening to Bob, I see you nodding your head, yes,
right.
yes. So do you have some personal experience with family members or anything that he's referring to?
I wouldn't say personal experience, but I think it's important for people to understand, especially my age and a little bit younger that are getting married, that just because you're married does not give your husband your power of attorney, because medically he might not be able to make those decisions like you're saying if it's not in writing. So you want to make sure that it's lined up. Even though we're young, you never know what could happen to you, today, tomorrow, in the future. And you want to make sure that you have the right person making decisions for you. Is that correct to think that way? I mean, I would think that I would want him to make my decisions, but if that's not in writing, could that cause problems?
That's absolutely correct, and especially with property, spouses do not have any inherent right to their spouse's property. So if one spouse wanted to, let's say, sell the house that was jointly owned, they would have to have power of attorney if the other spouse is incapacitated, because they do not have an inherent right to do anything with that. So normally it works a little better with the medical community, but sometimes there are problems in families, and maybe somebody doesn't want their spouse to be the one. The medical community can't tell when they're separated in the process of divorce or whatever, and you just might not want to let somebody try and disconnect you if they were so inclined.
Can we, unfortunately time is short, can we switch gears just a little bit? Can we talk a little bit about a revocable trust?
Yes, we can talk about that.
Okay. 101, help me out. Tell me about a revocable trust.
Well, a revocable trust is one that you do while you're alive, and the main aspect of it is that it's revocable.
Okay.
It's in place. You can title property in the name of that trust, but you can also change it or revoke it or do anything with it. You can even terminate it and transfer the property back into your own name. So it's normally called a revocable living trust.
Right.
Done while you're alive. It does become irrevocable and unchangeable at your death.
Right.
So when the grantor dies, then you get a different situation.
So a revocable trust is an attachment to a will. Both documents can be changed often. Tyler recommended 3 to 5 years to come in and to check on things on your estate.
Correct. Both documents are revocable or amendable.
Right.
They sort of go together.
Yeah.
But normally, if you're having a revocable trust, you want the will to pass the property into the revocable trust, called a pour-over will, and then you want the property to be distributed by the revocable trust rather than under your will. And any property that's already in the trust obviously comes under the power of the trustee and is distributed according to the terms of the trust. Both of those documents are a set of instructions. This is what I want done, and the law will uphold those. It's a little easier with the will because you can actually get court action to enforce what the testator has put in his will.
Okay. One of the arts of a good attorney or in a legal process to me would be the ability to paint a word picture to a client who might have some familiarity with some of the terms but not a working knowledge. It's got to be, because you know so much, it's got to be difficult to simplify the verbiage, to paint a simple word picture for people so they can make informed decisions.
That is what we try and do,
right.
And that's why we send the documents out for people to review in their living room, because nobody can sit at my conference table
right.
and review a document and not have mush brain.
Right.
So we want them to have time to review that document at their leisure when they're not under any pressure or stress, and let us know if there's anything in there that they do not want or that they did not tell us, or if we left something out. So it's just we do want to try and the best thing is probably to have them review the actual document, and then they can get their word picture that way. But while we're doing it, we do try and simplify things so that the pieces can all be put together.
Okay, so all the simplification is done during the course of someone's life, and you tweak it as they go and as you get to know each other, and you're trying to create a a world where the probate process is simple, easy, cost-effective? Is that the end goal?
Yes, or if we can avoid a process, the probate process, if all the property between spouses is in right of survivorship, you've avoided probate. So
gotcha,
we have another way to pass property for a small amount of property between spouses. But a big thing is we don't want to probate anything that we don't have to. But we want to make sure that what we're doing to avoid probate is realistic and in the client's best interest.
Ashley, I have to ask you, just listening to Bob and Tyler, some of the topics they're bringing up, is this something that you and Brandon have sat down and had and you can smile all you want at me.
Yeah.
Is this something that has been a dinner table conversation, or probably not yet?
It has not yet. I think it's definitely something to start thinking about and start
Right.
making moves on.
Right.
Right now, it's, I would think, fairly simple for us because we don't have any children, small estate, things like that. But it's definitely something to really start thinking about and letting, other friends and family know for sure.
Now, Bill, we want to make sure that people don't obsess on this.
Right.
The topic itself is a little bit morbid. So we want to make sure that we don't get them too early worried all the rest of their life
Right.
whether their documents are right.
But you want your estate to be lined up. You want things to be in place if something was to happen.
Yeah, I mean, everything to be organized, whether you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, you always want to have some sort of sense of where you are and where you're going and as your life changes. And people have financial advisors, and they make great cocktail conversation as they're going in their lives, and they're accumulating, and they're winning and succeeding. But it's a whole picture. It's trying to tie it all together to always keep your circle connected. And that's the impression that I get from listening to both of you talk today. It's
Yeah, I think that's it. You need a cohesive plan.
Right.
And you mentioned cocktail parties. I've had many people come in and tell me that their neighbor has a really great trust. Could I just do one like that for them?
Oh, God.
And I say, probably not.
Right.
Because your situation is different, your assets are different, how they're owned is different. And so, probably not, and they're crushed because their neighbor had the best.
We are running low on time. There are always so many questions to ask, but I've enjoyed having both you guys come in, and it's pretty cool in your office. You have two different generations, and representing maybe different clientele at the same time, and different perspectives, which is very valuable. I could see Bob and I always talking. Tyler, I see you and Ashley maybe having a cup of coffee and talking. It's just the way it is. If people want to go to your website, do we have...
Yes, if they want to
Sure.
find out more about us, it is www.rthompsonlawfirm.net.
Okay. And your phone number at your office?
Yes, it is 910-692-2244.
Okay. We want to make sure not to give Bob's personal phone number at the office. That's important. That's right. 692-2424.
It's 2244.
What did I say? 2244?
2424.
No good. That was Pinehurst Toyota. I'm sorry. 2424. So help me, it is. There's a plug for Pinehurst Toyota. Tax season is a great time to take stock, and I think you guys have given us a lot of food for thought, regardless of what age you are, if you're out, if you're working, if you're viable. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Bob
Thank you
Thompson,
for giving us this opportunity, Bill.
Yeah, and Ashley, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you back to talk about some real estate topics.
Yes, sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Everybody have a great week. Thank you.